In June 1967, Israel achieved a stunning and rapid military victory over 3 neighboring Arab states in what would come to be known as the Six-Day War. The feat remains one of the most remarkable examples of modern military strategy, as Israel, despite being geographically isolated and surrounded by hostile nations, managed to decisively defeat Egypt, Jordan, and Syria within a single week. The events leading up to the conflict were deeply rooted in the unresolved tensions that had persisted since the 1948 Arab-Israeli War, nearly 2 decades after Israel's founding. The Middle East remained a tinderbox of political, ideological, and territorial disputes. Palestinians residing in the Gaza Strip, controlled by Egypt, and the West Bank, governed by Jordan, continued to harbor aspirations for a future state and often anticipated that another war might overturn the existence of Israel. Meanwhile, Syria, under the influence of pan-Arabist ideology, supported militant groups intent on destabilizing Israel. Egyptian President Gamal Abdel Nasser, who was widely regarded as a leading figure in the Arab nationalist movement, believed that his nation could assert dominance over the region. His confidence was partially inspired by the outcomes of the 1956 Suez Crisis, where both the United States and the Soviet Union intervened in Egypt's favor, reinforcing his belief in Egypt's regional leverage. Israel, meanwhile, had emerged militarily stronger but remained constrained by its geographic vulnerabilities and the constant threat of coordinated attacks from neighboring Arab states. The geopolitical landscape of the early 1960s was marked by a mixture of divisions, rivalries, and fragile alliances among the Arab nations. Syria had experienced internal unrest with a failed coup in 1961 by officers sympathetic to Nasser, creating distrust and instability within its government and military. Jordan's king, Hussein, although wary of Nasser's ambitions, maintained a tense relationship with Egypt, which even included surviving an assassination attempt in 1962. Yet, despite these divisions, the shared goal of confronting and eliminating Israel remained a unifying force among Arab leaders, compelling them to adopt aggressive political and military stances that frequently manifested in cross-border raids, civilian attacks, and provocations along contested territories, such as the Golan Heights. These escalating tensions set the stage for the dramatic events of June 1967, where decades of hostility and strategic miscalculations would converge in a conflict that would reshape the region's political and military landscape. By early 1967, provocations along Israel's borders had reached a breaking point. Sporadic attacks by Syrian troops and Palestinian militants targeting Israeli civilians, especially in the Golan Heights, prompted Israeli reprisals that often embarrassed and angered Egypt, which was seen as failing to act decisively in support of the Arab cause. On November 13, 1966, Israeli forces conducted a raid on the West Bank village of Samu, further inflaming tensions among the Arab nations. The situation escalated again on April 7, 1967, when Syrian artillery provoked Israel into retaliatory bombing missions, during which Israeli Mirage fighter jets successfully downed several Syrian MiG-21s and conducted daring overflights of Damascus, demonstrating Israel's growing military prowess. Public pressure within both Israel and the Arab world intensified, and by May, the Soviet Union issued a warning to Nasser that Israel might attack Syria imminently. Although this intelligence was later determined to be inaccurate, it spurred Nasser into decisive action, ordering Egyptian troops to move into the Sinai Peninsula and compelling the United Nations Emergency Force to evacuate. Israel, in response, increased its military mobilization, calling up reserves and preparing the nation for potential war. The closure of the Straits of Tiran by Nasser on May 21 further heightened the crisis, as this key maritime route was critical to Israeli commerce and was viewed as a casus belli. In Tel Aviv and across Israel, citizens engaged in civil preparations for war. Women and children dug trenches, and mass grave preparations were made as the state's defense forces mobilized. By June, the threat of an all-out conflict had become tangible. The Israeli government faced a stark strategic reality: either submit to crippling military and economic pressure from the surrounding Arab states, or take the initiative to strike preemptively. The culmination of these tensions set the stage for a meticulously planned and executed military campaign that would demonstrate Israel's ability to leverage intelligence, technology, and operational coordination to achieve decisive results. On the morning of June 5, 1967, Israel launched its preemptive strike against Egypt, marking the opening salvo of the Six-Day War. The Israeli Defense Forces (IDF), consisting of 264,000 troops including reservists, 1,000 tanks, and 250 combat aircraft, struck with precision and speed. Israel's intelligence, bolstered by agents operating within Arab militaries, provided the crucial advantage that allowed for precise targeting of Egyptian airfields and communication networks. Within an hour, Israeli air power had decimated the majority of Egypt's combat aircraft and destroyed key air bases, crippling Egypt's defensive capabilities. The success of the Israeli Air Force created a domino effect, with complete air superiority. Israeli ground forces could advance without facing significant aerial opposition. Mechanized units moved rapidly into the Sinai Peninsula, bypassing fortified positions such as Raif and Gaza, while paratroopers neutralized artillery positions through targeted helicopter assaults. Egyptian units, caught unprepared and hampered by poor communications, found themselves encircled and overwhelmed. By evening, several Egyptian divisions had been effectively destroyed, and Israel had achieved its first major victories on the battlefield. Concurrently, Jordan, fearing Israeli advances, launched attacks into Israeli territory, prompting a rapid Israeli counteroffensive that targeted the West Bank and East Jerusalem. Intense fighting ensued in urban and fortified positions, with both sides suffering substantial casualties. The strategic importance of Jerusalem, divided since the 1948 armistice, made the battle particularly symbolic. Israeli forces employed coordinated artillery, tank and infantry assaults to breach Jordanian defenses, ultimately capturing key positions such as Ammunition Hill, the Rockefeller Museum, and the Old City's strategic points. By the end of the first 2 days, Israel had effectively neutralized Jordan's military capacity in the contested areas and gained control of vital territorial objectives, showcasing the effectiveness of preemptive strategy combined with superior intelligence and operational planning. The Egyptian front in the Sinai continued to collapse under the combined pressure of Israeli air and ground assaults. Israeli forces moved with remarkable speed and coordination, targeting supply lines, artillery positions, and armored divisions while exploiting weaknesses in Egyptian command structures. Field Marshal Abdel Hakim Amer's decision-making proved fatal. Delayed responses and flawed tactical orders left Egyptian troops exposed, and panic among soldiers further accelerated the disintegration of their defensive lines. Israeli tanks, supported by infantry and artillery, advanced rapidly toward the Suez Canal, creating bottlenecks that turned organized withdrawals into chaotic retreats. By June 8, Israeli forces had captured tens of thousands of Egyptian prisoners and seized enormous quantities of military equipment, including tanks, trucks, and artillery, while some reports indicate instances of executions and harsh treatment of prisoners. The broader military outcome was an overwhelming Israeli advantage. Across the southern front, the Egyptian army's morale and operational capacity were shattered, and the once formidable units were reduced to disorganized, retreating forces. The speed and decisiveness of Israel's campaign demonstrated a level of military coordination and strategic foresight that was unmatched by its adversaries. At the same time, geopolitical ramifications began to surface. The conflict not only altered territorial control but also displaced hundreds of thousands of Palestinians from the West Bank and Gaza, exacerbating the refugee crisis and creating a humanitarian challenge that Israel would have to address in the post-war period. The shock of Israel's military performance reverberated across the region, reshaping perceptions of Arab military capability and demonstrating the consequences of underestimating Israel's strategic planning and operational effectiveness. In the north, the Golan Heights became the site of Israel's final major confrontations during the Six-Day War. Syrian forces, entrenched in fortified positions amid steep and rugged terrain, initially resisted Israeli advances. However, deficiencies in training, leadership, and equipment rendered the Syrian defense largely ineffective against Israel's coordinated air and ground campaigns. Leveraging intelligence provided by the Israeli spy Eli Cohen, Israel conducted targeted airstrikes and artillery bombardments that gradually eroded Syrian positions. Ground forces, supported by engineers clearing mines and obstacles, engaged in fierce infantry combat to secure trenches and bunkers. The Syrian army, demoralized and disorganized, eventually abandoned key positions, resulting in the rapid collapse of their defensive line. By June 10, Israeli forces had effectively encircled and penetrated major strategic points, forcing Syria to accept a United Nations brokered ceasefire. The Six-Day War, which lasted less than a week, concluded with Israel asserting full military dominance over its adversaries, having expanded its territory threefold and secured critical strategic positions, including East Jerusalem and the Golan Heights. The victory, achieved through meticulous planning, intelligence, superiority, and tactical innovation, fundamentally altered the regional balance of power. For Israel, the outcome was both a military triumph and a validation of its national security doctrine, highlighting the effectiveness of preemptive strikes, rapid mobilization, and concentrated operational planning. For the Arab world, the conflict represented a catastrophic failure that would leave deep political, social, and military scars for years to come. The aftermath of the Six-Day War had profound and lasting consequences for the Middle East, shaping regional politics, military doctrines, and the Palestinian question for decades. Israel emerged, militarily dominant and territorially expanded, assuming control over the West Bank, Gaza, East Jerusalem, the Sinai Peninsula, and the Golan Heights. For Palestinians in occupied territories, the war dashed hopes of immediate independence, creating new refugee crises and exacerbating tensions with Israel. Arab states, humiliated and politically destabilized, vowed revenge, refused to formally recognize Israel, and contributed to a prolonged period of hostility that would precipitate further conflicts, including the Yom Kippur War of 1973. Additionally, the Six-Day War became a pivotal event in the context of the Cold War, as superpower involvement and regional alliances played significant roles in shaping the conflict's dynamics. The war also underscored the evolving nature of modern warfare, emphasizing the importance of intelligence, air power, mechanized ground forces, and rapid operational coordination. Israel's near-total destruction of the Arab air forces on the first day highlighted how preparation, strategy, and technological advantage could decisively shift the outcome of a conflict. Beyond the immediate military consequences, the Six-Day War left deep political and social reverberations. Anti-Semitic violence erupted in several Muslim-majority countries, and the collective memory of the conflict continued to influence Israeli and Arab national identities. In retrospect, the war was not merely a military engagement but a transformative episode that redefined borders, alliances, and aspirations across the Middle East, with repercussions that remain central to regional geopolitics nearly 6 decades later.